So thank you so much for joining us today at the Empowerment Zone. My name is Lina Khalifeh. I'm the founder of SheFighter, and I'm your host for today. The Empowerment Zone focus on highlighting the voices of women and achievements of women who are feminists, martial artists, entrepreneurs, authors, and share their stories with everyone. Today, my guest is from San Francisco Bay Area, and she was a police officer for 6 years before accepting a position with the Roseville Police Department near Sacramento after I think it was an 8 month. Janelle was unfairly terminated and began a 7 year fight for her career in the court system. So she has an interesting story, and she's so excited. I have to say that Janelle, that's the first time she's gonna more publicly talk about it, and she decided to write a book. So I'm just so happy to have her because she's brave like other women, and she wants to fight for gender equity and equality for other women. So please welcome Janelle Perez. So thank you, Janelle. Thank you so much for your time and joining us and for talking. It's I know it's we talked about it before, me and you. It's not easy to talk about what happened in your life and injustice going on. But tell us, I mean, why did you decide from the beginning to join the police department?
I have no great backstory here. I was kind of lost in college. I didn't know what I wanted to study, and my academic counselor was like, just find something that interests you. And criminal justice interested me. So I decided to study that. And when I was in my early 20s, I moved back to California after college, and I was like, okay, it's probably time to start a career. So
Yeah.
I didn't know, I thought about government agencies, but I didn't really want to be traveling, and so much, and getting placed in different countries and things like that. So I wanted to stay more local. So that's why I
Yeah.
decided the police
But
department.
what I noticed that you're also your background, you're into sports anyway. You started tennis.
Yeah.
So tell us more about how did you even got in tennis and how did you start competing in tennis, and even that probably led you to doing something joining the police and doing something that is good. So tell us more about your tennis background.
Well, my tennis background started when I was really young, when I was 5 years old. I started playing and I started competing at 8 years old. So tennis defined me like throughout my whole childhood until I graduated college at 21 because I played during my college years. So my dad got me into it, but it was like my identity for my whole entire childhood because that's what I did. It was like a job. It opened a lot of doors for me that otherwise may not have been opened, but it was hard. It was very challenging. It was by no means easy. I think that it was an easy transition for me into law enforcement because I was so used to working hard. I mean, in the summer, I'd play 8 hours a day if I wasn't competing. And so, mentally, you have to be very mentally tough in law enforcement and physically
Mm.
strong. And at that point in time, I was both of them, and I was ready for that. So it was a pretty easy transition for me.
Oh, that's, yeah, definitely. I find like anybody who's interested in any kind of sport, you find it like they're more disciplined and they're ready even to do more hard work, which is the law enforcement is not easy, I mean, to join it. I mean, looking, of course, different countries has different rules, but you also told me that in the fitness test, when you join the police, you have to do everything exactly like men, right?
Everything. Everything is the same. So, I'm a little bit more petite at like almost 5'5", and it didn't matter my height or weight. You could have a man that was 6'5", and we all had to do the same test. So we all had to, place certain times. You had to jump a wall. You had to do
Yeah.
drag a dummy, weight a dummy. So everything was the same for
But
us.
it's funny that they actually tell you like, oh, we treat women equally by doing the hard work that men are doing, but at the same time, it's not equal inside the law enforcement with women.
I think that's what frustrated me, seeing that I had to do all of the same things as a man to get hired, and my job was the same, but then having treatment that wasn't equal at the end of the day, with things that happened to me. So
Mm,
it's a double standard, and that's what I'm ready to speak about, because it's
yeah.
time, we fix
Yeah,
the
tell us what happened exactly in the law enforcement and how you faced injustice and discrimination. I think everybody's excited to know the story because somehow it reflects maybe to their life somehow. Even if they did not join the law enforcement, they probably have has felt, especially women, kind of like discrimination or injustice. So yeah, let us know.
Yeah. Well, it's a very long story, which is funny because Roseville, I only worked 8 months, but there's a lot to talk about there. But my first agency, I had a really good experience overall. There were some hiccups, some things that happened, but overall, I met a lot of good people, and it was a really good experience. In Roseville, my second agency, where I worked 8 months, again, I met a lot of great people, a lot of great police officers who treated me just like everyone else. There's just we're a select few that decided to take their power and what I feel was abuse it. So I discovered along the way, I wasn't complaining about anything. I would just, when you go to another agency, you're in a field training program as a new officer, so I had to do
Mm,
8 weeks of field training. And throughout that, you get close with your field training officers. They're in the car with you, you work with them. So I was having a conversation with one of my field training officers, and he was asking me, what are you doing after work? And I said, oh, I have to go home and read this book that was assigned to me by a sergeant. And he's like, oh, he had no idea. It was shocking to him. So, wasn't complaining at all. I did what I was told. I very much a rule follower. So, I just, he decided to look into it more. And it was later discovered that I was the only person in field training that had to read the book. And during the time I was in field training, there were a lot of I was the only female, but there were a lot of other male officers going through field training, none of which had to read the book. That was my first kind of, look at something that wasn't exactly fair. My next was, we had 8 weeks of field training when you come as a lateral officer. And the day I started with another officer, and he got to be done at 7 weeks. So I asked, I was a excellent police officer. It's hard for me to talk well about myself, but in my first agency, I got a lot of awards and commendations. And so I asked, if I could be done early too, because all my evaluations were positive, and they said no. And the only difference that I could see was gender. He was male and I was female. So those were some of the smaller things. In regards to some of the more deeper issues that I get to in my book, when I was terminated, I had an off-duty relationship when I was separated with another police officer, and it was investigated. Someone had filed a complaint and investigated an allegation that there was something inappropriate going on duty, which there wasn't, and which the investigation showed there was no evidence of that. But they decided to find me guilty of 2 policy violations in the beginning. And I decided, nope, I'm sorry, I didn't violate those policies. There's no evidence. I refused to sign my discipline letter. And shortly after that, I met with the chief of police and told him why I didn't violate the policies. And that's when he handed me a termination letter.
mm.
So, the male officer that I was seeing was not terminated and didn't face any, discipline like I did. So, it's a long story.
Yeah, but do you feel that they just do that sometimes to get rid of women in a way of like pressuring them to just leave? It's like some of them deep inside believe it's a man's job. So even though they still have these rules that they have to follow, but they still deep inside, like how probably they were lived or where they come from, they still believe it's a man's world, and it's easier to get those women outside of the law enforcement, the police department. I mean, I think a lot of women has faced that, but you kind of try to find different reasons why it happened. But I definitely understand because I faced a lot of things. Even I tried in my like early 20s even to get a job, but I was working for a company that is a very male dominated company. They wanted to find anything to pressure me to leave, like just to quit and leave. And I was trying, like, I was said, I'm not going to give them what they want. I'm just going to stay and prove myself. But it was energy draining. It's just so, the environment is so, it's like they're all like kind of a gang, or like a group of men just want to get rid of you. And sometimes it's a losing battle fighting against a group of people in power. So I definitely understand what you have been through. I mean, it's definitely hard. But tell us more about the book. First, the name of your book and why. And you said, like, that's it. It's time for me to write a book and talk about it. Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah. Well, my book is called The Moral Police, and I found it very fitting because I definitely felt judged. And based on their moral principles outside of work, I feel like as an employee, I should be able to live my life the way that I want to live when I'm not
Mm,
working. And so I tried to appropriately title my book, but this happened 8 years ago. And honestly, that was the time that I should have spoken up, was 8 years ago. But I followed some advice because we did take it to the court system. And so I stayed quiet and I did not share my story. I wanted to let things play out in the justice system, which I did not find justice in. So, it's one of those things that it should have happened a long time ago. But now I feel like, it's been 8 years. It's time to share because it's time to change. I mean, change should have been long ago, when they had 6 female police officers out of 127 at the police department. Something's wrong with that number.
yeah.
It's so skewed. How can women have equality in the workforce when there's so few women in the
Mm,
workforce? Speak up.
exactly.
I'm just ready. It's past time for me to share my story and start fighting for things that mean something. They mean something to me and for society. So
No, for sure. And I support you 100%. I think, how they say it, like, never late than never,
yeah,
like, yeah. And yeah, don't look at the years. Sometimes it's a learning experience. It's your journey. Sometimes we're just afraid to speak up for certain reasons. And when we feel like we have the confidence, and there's a lot of, pressure on women, different countries, even like Western countries, like United States. Sometimes we think it's like one of the advanced countries for women, but it's way far than this. As we can see now, what's happening with racism and discrimination, and the Me Too movement and everything going on. But I think it's everyone feel that and faces that in one way or another in different countries, but they have definitely different experiences. But I'm interested because I wrote my book, and while I was writing my book when I was like on my sixth chapter or something, I felt like quitting. Have you felt like you want to quit after you went back and kind of relived the whole story and want to write this on papers now? And had you like even ideas about what's going to happen if I put that book out? And have you felt that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I felt it in many steps of the process. It's probably why it's taken me longer than I had hoped. You make yourself so vulnerable putting everything out there. It's
Mm,
not a book about, my upbringing and my childhood per se, but I touch on topics like that. And those were hard times for me. I didn't have the best childhood growing up. And so, it's emotional. I literally, like, blood, sweat, and tears went into this book. I had several moments, even before I wrote the book, that I wanted to quit, that I wanted to give up. I think
mm,
my resilience really lied in getting strength in certain people that helped me. And also just I've always had that really fighting spirit. I think, I attribute that to tennis a lot. Yeah, I love to compete. I've always been a fighter. And so I think that, that helped me not quit. So.
mm. And do you have people that would support you in that journey of writing a book, or you kind of made that decision by yourself?
My go-to and my number one supporter throughout this whole journey has been my dad. We've butt heads a lot in my past because he's been really tough on me in my childhood, but he's been the one who didn't judge me, the one who supported me, the one who stood by me, even when I've made my own mistakes and there's things I'm not proud of. He's always been there for me. And, he's more of a listener. Like, he's like, hey, if it's something that you feel is going to help you, help other people, then do it. He doesn't push me to do one thing or the other, but he's definitely a supporter. So that's where I found the most support is in him.
Yeah, it's really important for every woman to find a support coming from even like your uncle, your father, your husband, your brother, your even other women supporting each other. But sometimes you feel like more confident when it comes to men supporting you because you feel like they know they know it's a man's world, and they know how hard it is for women and even their daughters to do something in this world. People are even in Western countries. I mean, also living in Canada, sometimes you think that they are following the rules on like gender equality and equity in the even labor force, but at the same time, they would say we accept diversity, all of this, but deep inside they don't. When you get in the, let's say, corporate or company, and then you realize, oh, it's not like that what they stand for. I've heard a lot about different companies that, they just put advertisement out there about women, supporting women, but I heard a lot of people would say that's not really what they stand for. But I think they try to just have more followers following them and supporting them. And let's say if the trend goes for women, then everybody wants to talk about, supporting women, even though deep inside they don't. Well, there's this story of I met this professor who's from Switzerland, and he was coming to Jordan for some work. And he said, men there, they always say, oh, we are with gender equality and we support the women. And he asked them, but would you let your sister go out, let's say, and start her own business? He said, no, 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 I wouldn't. No, it's different when it comes to my sister. I'm like, how come it's different when it comes to your sister? Like, you talk in public about supporting women, but look at you, what are you doing inside your own house and your home, your family? You don't support women, so technically you don't really support women. But we've seen that people put masks on just to fit in, but people who really work for helping women to rise and get better opportunities are few. But hopefully in the future, things will change and we get more support coming from men.
I
But
hope
why
so.
is it, Janelle, why is it important to share your story now and with women?
It's important because, my story and the discrimination I suffered based on my gender, and I also think my marital status, it's not the only discrimination that exists, but I feel like it's a really good example where I was trying to live my life, but my employer didn't like that lifestyle that I was living. And I don't think that it's a way that we should be letting our employers control, our lives. I think it's really important for me to share my story because I don't know who else is going through this. I feel like every so often I'm reading a news article on my phone and another woman's been discriminated in the workplace or, somewhere. And I'm just, it's getting very old. We're at the point where we need to collectively stand up together and fight for our rights to be treated equally. And that goes, beyond just gender, but I really am an advocate of equality. And I think it's important that we stand together. And if I can just be a supporter of someone who maybe doesn't have the courage to speak up, which ironically enough, I must tell you, I didn't, I just recently shared with people that I was writing a book. Only people in my really close circle knew before that. And I've already had 2 people come and share stories with me about what happened to them and the inequality that they faced. And so for me, that's what I want. I want people to share their stories. I want them to get strength from me to stand up and share. And so I'm hoping that I can accomplish that with sharing my story.
Of course, and the support coming from us, Janelle, and everybody else. I mean, I'm gonna support you 100%, and I'm sure all the women joining us today. I'm so happy that there's new names here in the group that joined to just to listen to your story, that would support you for sure on that journey. You're not alone now. You know, the first step would be. It's so hard. The first step to take is to speak about it, or to at least understand that it happened to you, and I'm not going to be silent anymore, and I'm going to take steps, like action steps, not just like talk about it, but you are writing a book that would benefit other women. Some women might get that book and would face some kind of injustice, and they say that's a perfect book for me. But when, and I understand because I also wrote a book, and when I wrote that book, I was thinking about the other women that would benefit from reading my story and my journey. And then life would kind of give you all these opportunities that you will not even imagine. You would think that of the fear of taking that step. But I think you're just so brave, and other women would definitely need to just take steps. Even though the step is so scary to take, just take one step and see the results of that step. It's going to be fascinating. You would be blown away by the results. But you told me you have kids, right?
Yep, I sure do.
So a boy and a girl, or two girls, or
Two
a boy?
boys and a girl.
Two boys and a girl. So how do you teach your kids about gender equality and gender equity, and how do you deal with that? I mean, I don't have kids, so so technically I don't know, but I'm sure other mothers would love to know.
Yes. Well, I really try to set an example. That's what I try to do in my family. And so, we've been fortunate to host people in our home from other countries. And that really just opens up my kids to diversity and
Mm,
seeing all the differences in the world. And we have conversations from that. Like one of my boys says, well, I can't speak with her. She's not, I don't understand her because of her English. And I was like, well, then we help her. That's what we
mm,
do. We help her to feel comfortable, because I've learned with language, sometimes the language is fine. I can understand. It's the fear of saying it wrong. And then I try to do a lot of scenario based questions with them and put them in other people's, places. Like, how would you feel if you lived in that country and you needed help and you didn't speak the language and someone laughed at you? How would it
mm.
make you feel? I feel like it's really important for them, and we do it with everything. I say it to them about the color of their skin. Now, if you had different color skin and somebody treated you differently because of that, how would you feel? I really think it's important to raise them all to be well-rounded individuals. I want them to be happy and healthy foremost, but it's really important. I want them to make a difference, and I want them, my boys. My daughter, I set more of an example because she's still young, but my boys, we have more conversations about these things. And
Mm.
I want them to know that, they have the opportunity to do a lot of good in the world, and they can be behind women and support women. That's what, they need to do. We don't have in our house, like my boys, I assign them different chores. They do the laundry. I'm teaching my boys to cook. There's no gender roles here. We're
Yeah.
going to do everything because you're a human being, and I expect you to know how to do these things growing up.
Yeah.
You can't rely on somebody else to do these things for you. So a lot of them are examples. My older ones now can watch a few TV shows that are appropriate with us. So I know when we watched the last season of Survivor, there was a female police officer, ironically enough, and that was her job. And she was talking about how in the game, if women lie, cheat, or steal, they're seen, in a negative light. They're seen as phony, a fraud. But if men do it, it's good gameplay, and they're a stud and things like that. And so those are opportunities for me to share with my kids, like, this isn't right. Women shouldn't be viewed this way because they're doing something. I mean, yeah, it's a game, but in reality, we can bring this back to life. And that happened to me in the workplace. Men were violating policies left and right, but there were no repercussions. And I didn't even violate a policy, and they came after me. So
Mm.
it's really important for me to use real life examples with my older ones to teach them. But I really try to do a lot of like scenario and to get them to feel how someone else would feel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a nephew and a niece, and they've been like raised around me, so they have never even imagined that, just because they're a boy or a girl, that they cannot do certain things. Because one time, like my nephew just told me like, "Oh, are you gonna get a motorcycle? And you should do this and that." And it's like, he never even thought that, for example, being raised in Jordan in the Middle East, like, this should be more as man's thing, having a motorcycle. He would even ask me for, the craziest things, not considering, my kind of like gender roles. But sometimes, what I notice, like, being raised around they actually get inspired a lot by you and who do they want to become and their role models. But at the same time, the school and their social life would play a big part of their identity and their personality. So once they start going to school, they start questioning certain things that they never questioned. Like, do girls have short hair, or you decided to cut your hair? Or especially being raised in that environment. Like, for example, if you were born and raised in France, all girls have short hair. It's normal. But it's just how fascinating the environment can affect children decision. So, but the environment around the house, I mean, the mother, definitely the mother, I would say the mother, having a mother as a role model, what she's doing, and like living her life every day. And those kids are not stupid. They see their mother, and they know exactly how women need to live, exactly the way they view their mother. But what do you hope to change, like sharing your story, what do you hope to change in the world?
I really hope that my story can inspire people. And, I did face, discrimination in the workplace, but I also felt a lot of injustice in the court system. I lost, then I won an appeal, and then some, a judge died and they just decided to rehear it. There were no really rules behind it. And so I feel like, in reading some of even the court paperwork, the last decision that was written, it was like, well, it was something to the effect of, well, the police department didn't know that they were doing something wrong, or something like, it's like they're not being held accountable. And
Yeah.
so I feel like, for consistency purposes, when I won the appeal, my case was referred to numerous times. And I feel like it really needs to be a topic that comes up, in the judicial system as well. So it needs to be like, I just really, truly believe that employers should not be dictating our lives off duty. So I feel
Mm.
like we should be able to live our lives the way we want to live our lives off duty. And that's a really important thing for me as well. So I hope to give strength to women, but I also hope to educate men. There's a lot
Yeah.
of male leaders in law enforcement, and I believe there needs to be a lot more female leaders in law
Oh, yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah.
And not just the chief of police, or I mean, sergeants and lieutenants and captains all the way up. I think there needs to be more female leadership, because women are such a minority in law enforcement that they are scared to speak up. I know,
Mm.
because I worked in an agency, my first agency, for 6 years, and I would, at that point in my life, I would not have spoken up. I
Mm.
got strength as I got older. And so I really want to be a voice. I want to be an ear if somebody
Mm.
needs to talk. I want to provide courage, but I also want to provide change. I want
Yeah.
there to be change.
And
So.
what do you think the solution to have more women joining the law enforcement? How we can get those? Because I think most women would believe that's a man's job. Probably it's very risky. We're gonna risk our life every single day. So how do you think the solution can be to have more women interested in joining the police department?
I think, well, I think a few ways. The first thing is, when I did all the physical agility test for Roseville, there were a lot of women there, but I was the only one hired. So part of the problem is,
Oh, okay. I did
yeah,
not know that they do that. Okay.
there were a lot of women. I wasn't the only woman. I was the only woman that got hired, but there were a lot of women. But they decided, and don't quote me on this, I think they hired somewhere around 6 men, and I was the only woman.
Yeah.
So they have an opportunity to change that. They have an opportunity to take more women. Do I still think that the numbers aren't going to be equal, because there is fear in law enforcement, and right now it's it's a whole different world than when I started. But I think there needs to be more education, and there needs to be more acceptance, and women need to feel empowered and that they're equal in order to feel like, okay, I'm going into this job equally. I'm not less than a man. I'm not less than this person. So I think there needs to be definite change, but I think
Yeah.
it's with education.
And I understand that a lot of rejection will kind of, because if you get rejected and you apply again and you get rejected, especially women, because they're just women, they don't want, like, they give maybe 1 seat or 2 seats to women and the rest we need to hire men, because they have other reasons for it. It's just kind of depressing and sad for women to try again. I mean, how much like times they need to try again just to get accepted in a job or in a position that they qualify for. And most of them, that's how I also felt, in mostly Western societies, is like, kind of net, connection, like who do you know, and then you get hired, or if you have a friend that works there, that gets you in. And mostly men are like good in having like their friends getting in the job. So sometimes I just wonder if they're even qualified enough to do the task, or they're just hired because it's someone they know. So they can definitely hire more women. They need to give more opportunities to women, but because up there they're mostly men, and they control everything, and they decide how many. I worked in, like, long time ago, I think it was 9 years ago, I worked in Toronto in one of the gyms in downtown. And you know how Canada talks about equal rights, all of this, and they have no discrimination. Or But my employer at that time, he was white, and one time he told me, Lina, what's up with your hair? And I have a curly hair. And I said, what's wrong with my hair? It's like, it's messy. I'm like, that's my natural hair. I'm like, well, I even thought about it. Well, he's probably jealous because he's bald. He has no hair. But he was like kind of picking up on me every single day. I think, the only like Middle Eastern woman working in that gym, and they just did not like it. They were like two women, just me and another woman, and the rest were all men. And all the leads go, like all the clients go to men. They would just network between each other and have, they become friends. And I was like, after 8 months of working there, I'm like, that's so toxic, it's so bad. I don't want to stay in this environment. And he told me a few times about my hair. He pointed it out, like, you need to comb your hair. I'm like, excuse me, that's a curly hair. Have you seen a curly hair before? And I found it very, it was discrimination, racism, all kind of, and they always talk about, they did like training for sensitivity, where you're not allowed to talk to customers in a certain way, pointing out their faults. Or I'm like, look at your faults,
Yeah, I think that
before.
it comes back to them. It's, they're so quick to judge, but then, they, it's such a frustrating, it's just such a frustrating thing. And in law enforcement, women are so, they should be valued so much more. I know what I brought to the table, and how, well-rounded I was. I would, go in and try to de-escalate a situation with my voice. And a lot of men don't have that same approach. Some do, but there's other ones that would not use that same approach. And I don't think they recognize the value that women actually provide in law enforcement, because, a lot of women aren't 6'5", 7 feet tall. They don't have that physical stature. They're smaller. And I know for me personally, I used my voice a lot to de-escalate. And so, women should be valued a lot more in law enforcement, and a lot more in a lot of, occupations. But it's just something that it's been male dominated for forever, since
Forever.
its existence. So it's hard to change. It's hard to change that, but that's what they need. So.
I think the best way for change, first speaking about it and then taking an action. And definitely by writing your book, you're taking an action. And that book will just spread. And I wish you the best of luck with the book. But my last question would be where people can find you. Do you want people to follow you? Do you have a social media for the book or not yet?
I haven't really started my marketing yet for the book because I don't have a release date, but I'm hoping the end of December, otherwise early 2021 for a release date. I'm on
Okay.
Instagram right now, and I just set up a LinkedIn. I never had one before, so so
Oh, great. Yeah. Technology.
that's where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Janelle, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and with all the women here listening to you. And please let us know once a book is out there, we'll promote it for you on our social media. So I'll be your biggest support. I'm going to promote it. I'm going to talk about it, how important it is for women just to know your story. And just thank you so much for just speaking about it. Thank you, Janelle.
Yes, and thank you because you're an inspiration to me. I know that. I know I've read your book, and you've had a battle in your life too. And I really appreciate people like you because you help people like me. Speak up and get that courage. So I really appreciate you and everything you do.
No, thank you. That's definitely nothing because like people would like you would learn, then you would teach, then you would mentor, then you would help others to empower, to empower themselves, and that's what you should all like do first, like learn something, then teach it, then speak about, and that's all, and that's what I'm doing. I know that a lot of people would listen to the stories that I would share and the guests, that I bring in, and I just want people to know more about this. But thank you so much for just being here today and sharing that with all of us. And for everybody else who joined, thank you so much, all of you, for being here on a Saturday morning. I'm not sure if you have a long week. We have a long weekend in Canada. It's like Thanksgiving. So if
Wow.
you're in Canada, happy Thanksgiving. If you're not, I don't know. Enjoy your weekend, and if you want to get more of the empowerment zone and different guests every week, I'm trying, by the way, my best every week to get an interesting guest and interesting story about women and how they face just different challenges and how they're overcoming it. Just join our Facebook group, the Empowerment Zone, or just subscribe to our website and you will get the latest updates. And our next guest is interesting. She's a trans woman all the way from the Middle East who escaped ISIS. Yeah, her name is Ziva Gorani, and she's Kurdish woman, and she immigrated all the way to Canada. She has an interesting story being a trans woman in the Middle East and escaping ISIS and making her way all the way to Toronto. And I I love that Canada takes people, a diversity of people who are LGBTQ, people who just looking to immigrate. And I love that about Canada. So that would be our next guest for next Saturday. Make sure you reserve in that event and have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you, Janelle. Take care.
you.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye bye.
You. Bye.